Good morning, Richie. How are you? Are you still reading? I thought today that I would read a book that we've read together before, just because I haven't spoken to you for a while and I think you like this book. So I'm going to read a book called Don't Pick Brian. Don't Pick Brian by Anne Harth. Don't pick Brian. He's afraid of the ball. Brian heard the whispers. His face felt warm. He shuffled his feet. Janie, Peter pointed. Janie skipped over to the stand with Peter's team. Theo, Amy said, you're with us. Theo stood behind Amy. The group of kids waiting grew smaller. Soon Brian stood alone. Brian, you're on Amy's team, Mr. Rich said. Okay, listen up. We're doing something different today. Brian sighed. What now? How do you think Brian was feeling, Richie? Do you think he felt a bit of dread because he felt like he wasn't ever getting picked for the team? Today we will run relay races. Brian heard some groans. Running? It had to be better than ball games. Line up, teams, Mr. Rich said. Amy stood at the front of their line. Everyone wanted to be first. Brian was last. Mr. Rich pointed to the other side of the field. Do you see that orange cone out there? Everyone looked. Everyone nodded. When I blow this whistle, boot, you can start. The first person runs around the cone and back here. Tag the next person in the line, then that person will go. The team that finishes first wins. Mr. Rich lifted his weight. Got that? Everyone nodded. Ready? Mr. Rich raised the whistle to his lips. Brian stood on one foot and then the other. Wheat! Amy and Peter took off. Go, Amy! Run, Peter! Peter was faster. He raced around the cone and headed back. Amy wasn't far behind. They pounded back to the start. Peter tagged the next person. Amy tagged hers. The next two raced away. Brian felt his heart beat faster. There were only 5 people in front of him. Could he do this? Would he lose it for his team? Brian would run against Janie. She was fast. The kids shouted and yelled. Brian was quiet. There were only 2 people to go. Theo was in front of Brian. He was ready. Theo took off. He raced around the cone and headed back. Peter's team was still ahead. Brian's stomach hurt, but he was ready. Theo pounded toward him. Brian held out his hand. Theo slapped it. Go, he shouted. Brian went. Janie was ahead. Her braids flew behind her. Brian dug his feet into the ground. He ran as fast as he could. He looked up. Janie seemed to be closer. Brian ran harder. He raced around the cone. Janie was so close he could almost touch her. He ran even faster. Come on, Brian, his team yelled. They cheered, they clapped. You can do it, Brian. Brian pushed harder. He passed Janie and crossed the finish line. Amy's team wins, Mr. Rich lifted his weight. Now, he said, let's mix up the teams. The kids stood together in a group. Theo and Janie are the new captains. Brian stood in the middle of the group. He heard the whispers. Pick Brian. He's the best runner. Brian grinned. Oh, that was a nice story, wasn't it, Richie? What do you think that story was trying to say? I think that it was trying to say that sometimes you might not be good at one thing, but you might be really good at something else. So you should never give up trying. Okay, shall we answer these questions together? What lesson do other students learn because of Brian? I think that's what they learn. They learn that lesson that somebody might not be good at something, but they might be brilliant at something else. How did Brian feel when he heard the whispers? Do you think he felt a little bit sad, or do you think he felt happy? Well, when they were whispering at the end, I think that Brian felt happy because he knew that the other children thought he was brilliant at running. Right, Richie, I'm going to go now, but I just thought I'd read you a story and say hello because I haven't spoken to you for a while, and I hope that you carry on reading because it's very important and that you're practicing every day. Okay, take care. Bye bye.